We're currently in the middle of the largest and fastest religious shift in the history of our country. In the last 25 years, 40 million people have effectively stopped going to church. This religious shift in church participation is larger and faster than the religious shift experienced in the First Great Awakening, Second Great Awakening, and Billy Graham crusades combined. And the result of this trend is staggering. This shift in church participation has now led to 28% of Americans identifying their religious affiliation as none. It's left the church in a position where there are less and less trained pastors to do the work of ministry, and it's even led commentators to suggest that we're now living in a post-Christian culture. Because of these shifts, 1 year ago we said, Imagine what part we could play in changing the religious shift we've experienced as our culture. And as we believed then, we still believe today, God has uniquely positioned us at Deer Creek to be a resourcing church in the Denver metro area. Tim, you're the executive pastor here at Deer Creek, and you played a huge role in making sure that our Hope for Tomorrow campaign really was a success. When you think about what it means to be a resourcing church, kind of the goal of the Hope for Tomorrow campaign, what does that mean?
Yeah, I think there's a number of parts to it. We need to be a healthy church to begin with. We're going to be no use to anybody outside the walls of this church if we're not healthy inside the walls of this church. And so a big piece of that is congregational vitality. And thankfully, that's something we've seen God do here in the last few years. Within the last 2 years alone, our attendance has grown by 30% with adults and children. We've been able to baptize over 30 people, and we have added 190 new members into the life of this congregation. In the last year alone, we've had 50 small groups that have been running, and we've given away over $50,000 to benevolence needs here in the congregation. So we see that vitality here that really helps us believe that we can be useful outside of these walls as well.
Absolutely. And a big component, too, with the Hope for Tomorrow campaign, when we said being a resourcing church, was training new pastors. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yep. We often think of pastors kind of going away to seminary and then just magically appearing and being pastors.
Yeah.
But being a pastor is a lot more like being a doctor than you would really realize, in that there's classroom training for sure. You do the languages and you do all the biblical studies, but also you need to learn on the job. Just like a doctor would have a residency in a hospital, pastors learn how to be a pastor from other pastors, and they go through that process. And so that's a part of what we're doing with our pastoral residents, is helping them get a feel of what does it actually look like to do this job, not just learn about these things.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And we have always had this in our DNA at Deer Creek to plant churches. But part of the Hope for Tomorrow campaign was saying, hey, let's take that desire, take that ambition that we have, and let's really seek to accelerate church planting.
And the church planting, Dr. Timothy Keller is famous for saying this, statistically speaking, is the best tool that we have for bringing people to faith. It's the best tool of evangelism available to us. And we've said we want to plant 10 churches in the next 10 years.
Imagine. To be a resourcing church means three things: growing in congregational vitality, being a church that trains future pastors, and by the grace of God, planting 10 churches in the next 10 years. Last year, that's what we imagined. And in order to do that work, we sought to raise $800,000. So where do we stand today? Well, unexpectedly, by God's faithfulness, we raised well beyond that. We raised over $890,000. And to facilitate the growth we've seen in our congregation, we added 2 new kids' classrooms, we expanded our lobby and coffee bar, we updated our worship space, expanding our capacity by more than 20%, made updates to our AV system, and put in a beautiful new work of stained glass. And what's more, we've seen amazing growth in the area of pastoral training as well. Over the last year, we've added 2 pastoral residents, Dawson Rush and Abel Chaco. Dawson's a student at Denver Seminary and has so many gifts that will be a blessing to Deer Creek Church. Abel's a pastoral resident. We hope will be a potential church planter in the Denver area to the Indian community. We have just hired a new resident, Theo Stiegel, who will also begin his residency at Deer Creek Church in January. And unexpectedly, again, by God's faithfulness, we not only added a pastoral residency program, but we also added a pastoral internship for our high school and college-age students, and we now have 10 interns in that program. And what about church planting? Well, we brought on several new church planting residents. We're supporting Denver's first Spanish-speaking Presbyterian church planter, along with 2 new church planters, Caleb Clark and Chris Weniger. These are church planters who we would not be able to support if it were not for the Hope for Tomorrow campaign. And what's more, unexpectedly again, by God's faithfulness, we've developed connections in the Indian and Chinese communities in Denver, and we plan to bring on church planters who can hopefully reach those areas in the future. Deer Creek, this shift in our culture isn't something we have to fear. God is faithful to his people, faithful to his church. He said, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. We don't have to fear. Even though the world is shifting, we have bright hope. Great is God's faithfulness. We have strength for today, bright hope for tomorrow, because of God's great faithfulness.